Hey, deserving listeners, this is part 3 in me reacting to a video on YouTube called Andrew Tate Goes to Therapy. This is on the YouTube channel called Cobra Conquer. Let's watch. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Let's see what happens.
In my worldview, in my world, I'm the hero, right? I'm the head of the clan. Not just my family, but of a lot of people. A lot of people rely on me. Lots of women rely on me. Children rely on me, etc. So everyone comes to me every time there's a problem. So they continued to do that while I'm in a jail cell, expecting me to have some kind of answer.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I don't have an answer this time. Every other time I had an answer, but this time is a bit unique.
How did that feel? You don't have the answers.
So yeah, he's good therapist, good instinct. And it takes a skilled therapist to let a lot of those things go by, the things that Andrew Tate says. You know, I'm not in my therapist mode right now. I'm YouTuber mode, I suppose. So when I'm listening to Andrew Tate talk, you know, there are just a couple lines, and you know, if he just said there was uncertainty, I didn't know what was going on, and I was letting a lot of people down, then it wouldn't irk me. But the way he frames it is, I had all these women that depend on me, and all these children that depend on me, and people are coming to me for answers. And I said, hey, the circumstances are different now. You know, it's a weird way to frame all that. It's an indication of the way he sees the world. There's always an opposition. There's always someone outside of him that is being annoying, right? And so to look past all of that, just let that go past you as a therapist, and to try to highlight the content that Andrew Tate is presenting that is more human and might head down a road of perhaps helpfulness to Andrew Tate. I think that's what David is trying to do. Let's rewind that.
Time I had an answer, but this time is a bit unique.
How did that feel? You don't have the answers. You can't help.
Yeah, I mean, it was frustrating. It's very frustrating, and it's the uncertainty that would bother me. I don't think I felt sad very often, but I certainly felt extremely frustrated. I would sit there and think, there has to be a way out of this room.
This is interesting. He is being more vulnerable than I've ever seen. And I've probably seen 0.01% of the content that he has, probably even less than that, on the internet. I've barely watched any of his material. So maybe he's like this often, but the stuff that I've seen, he does not even come close to this kind of humanness, right? Now, it's not as human as I would wish for him, so that he would live a happier life. And I don't know, but I suspect a happier life that would not harm other people. I don't know if he's harming others, but there's a lot of evidence that he might be. So he has a long way to go to get there, but this is in that direction.
I wake up and I go, I want more money. If I can get pissed off enough about it, I can do 36-hour workdays, right? So there's nothing wrong with being angry in my world, as long as you are putting it in the correct direction. It's uncontrolled anger, I think, is a problem.
Right. Anger can be used as a fuel, and it's necessary. And from my framework, anger sometimes is a mask for pain.
I'd agree with that.
So
I just figured out where David Sutcliffe, I know him from. He is Chris on Gilmore Girls. He's Rory's dad. The beard just makes him look so different. But if I just don't look at the beard, everything above the beard, that's Chris from Gilmore Girls. So it's just weird. I've watched Gilmore Girls 3 times, I believe, all the way through. At first, I didn't like it because I thought they talked too fast. And I also thought that Lorelai's parenting was problematic, but over time, I fell in love with the show. And I wonder if it's time to watch again. Although there's so many shows I want to watch again, like The Office and Parks and Rec. What was I saying? He is saying that, let's rewind.
Anger can be used as a fuel, and it's necessary. And from my framework, anger sometimes is a mask for pain.
Right, so he's either using emotion-focused therapy or some other framework of therapy, or his own, as he puts it, that will put forth that anger can often be a secondary emotion or a response to being hurt or being afraid. And that is something that I find to be a very useful framework. Sometimes it's hard to fit every experience of anger into this framework, but often it is useful to see this way, and it does resonate with people, and it resonates with me. And I think what David is trying to get at is, you were angry that you were incarcerated because you were no longer in control, and you're saying that you were frustrated and you were angry. Is it possible that there was some other emotion that preceded that anger, like being hurt or being afraid? Can you admit that to yourself? And I hope that people understand that therapy is not about digging up emotions or making people vulnerable just to make people vulnerable. It's designed to help people. It depends on the context, depends on the way it's done. Generally speaking, when you see this kind of interaction, the therapist is doing this kind of against it's sort of like a therapist. So if I was in David's shoes and I was treating someone like Andrew Tate, I would kind of see Andrew Tate as two different people or two different modes within him. One is the true Andrew, someone who is human and able to have all the normal human emotions and wants to have those emotions and wants to express them, wants to have them received, wants to have them taken care of, also wants some self-compassion around those emotions. I would see that. Then I would see another part of Andrew of him being defensive about it, saying, and everyone has these modes. Even very emotionally intelligent people will, when they narrativize their life, they will have a much easier time identifying frustration and anger and irritability than they will expressing or even acknowledging to themselves that they were afraid or they were hurt. So what I'd be thinking if I were in David's shoes is, okay, I'm getting the defense, but how do I get to the real Andrew Tate? And so when I get there and that part of him is allowed to express himself when he feels safe, then I will reward that, so to speak, with a corrective experience of making him feel heard and understood and not judged and safe and cared about. And then the defensive part of him that is always saying, no, I'm just angry, or I don't have emotions, that defense won't be needed as much. And the ego won't utilize it as much, so that the real human on the inside is able, we have needs around that. When we have an emotion, it's an indication typically of a need that is being perturbed or satisfied, because emotions can be joy and other kinds of positive emotions. So when we are hurt and we are afraid, we have, something's happening to us, and it's very common that we want to express them to ourselves, to have it be acknowledged, and also have it be reacted to. I'm fairly certain, and there's no way to prove this or to experiment on humans in this way to find out, but there's a lot of evidence pointing to the very strong possibility that we evolved emotions like sadness because it benefited us. It benefited us in terms of procreation and survivability, in that when, for example, when we are left alone, imagine 200,000 years ago and we're with our 50 members of our extended family and tribe, and we are traveling around looking for food or shelter or something, and we're 5 years old or 50 years old, and we wander off and we get left behind. And then we get hurt. We're hurt because we thought that people cared about us. We also get afraid because we might be attacked. There were predators, like the sort of cat kingdom, the feline kingdom would regularly eat us as humans. We weren't at the top of the food chain back then. And so we evolved to have that immediate feeling of fear and also of hurt, of like, hey, I thought people cared enough about me to tell me that they were leaving or to watch over me. And then you're afraid, so you start looking around and you're, oh my God. And so you are motivated to solve that fear by running and finding your people. Let's say you do, but then that fear of hurt, of your feelings hurt, also kicks in, so that it motivates you to cry or to say something of like, hey, you guys hurt my feelings. And then that alerts other people like, oh, next time let's make sure that we tell Kirk that we're leaving and we don't leave him behind, because I have compassion. It's that whole emotion, behavior, perception matrix, if you will. And then that led to that Kirk 200,000 years ago living longer to be able to procreate and to propagate one's genes. So we have these needs, and when those needs are being frustrated, like we're being told by society that we can't have sadness or fear, then we just stuff it and we don't do anything about our emotions. We have things that are happening to us that cause fear and cause hurt. And we're just like, well, I'm a bad person. I'm ashamed of it. No one wants to listen to me, so I'm just going to keep it down. Or, I'm going to have a strong mind. I'm going to have willpower. I'm going to distract myself with alcohol or weed. And I'm just going to, and all the while, one's needs aren't being met, but we evolved to do that. And when we are able to do it, we can relax. And there's a function to it. Forget 200,000 years ago. If you look at today, when someone doesn't invite you to a party, or even just more simple, you're at the mall and your friends just wander off and they don't tell you that they're wandering off, you get sad and you go, hey, I felt like you kind of ditched me. Oh, I'm sorry. It keeps us bonded. It keeps us in our relationships. It alerts people that you care about the relationship or something. There's a lot of function to that. And so when therapists are asking clients for this information of trying to soothe the defensive part of them, the defense, and create safety for the humanness to come out. It's not just digging for emotion because it's like, I got Andrew Tate to be vulnerable. It's actually a function of trying to help someone to realize that they can be human and that they are human and that there are options. The hope would be for someone like Andrew Tate is, the next time I have an emotion, maybe I'll actually acknowledge it and put aside my defensiveness and maybe even reach out to people in a way that is meeting my needs. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. So I don't know about you, but throughout my day, I have two opposing forces in my mind between what I want to do, like playing a video game or playing with my dogs, and what I should do, like exercise more or eat more fiber or something. As a therapist, I talk with a lot of clients about this inner conflict. Most people think it's all about willpower, even though research demonstrates that willpower doesn't really work. There are a lot of evidence-based techniques that actually work that people don't usually consider, like using behavioral shaping techniques or healing from our relational traumas that keep us stuck internally. Well, one option worth exploring is BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, it's worth giving a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient and suited to your schedule. And also, you can switch therapists at any time at no additional charge. So make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
I'd agree with that.
So did you experience pain in there? I know pain is a kind of an abstract word, but was it painful?
So David asked another zinger, did you feel pain? And then Andrew Tate goes, which I would suspect if I were in David's shoes that this is going too vulnerable, or we've gone for too long in vulnerability. And then David follows it up with another version of that, trying to soften it a little bit, because I think he noticed that, because previously when David would ask a question that was getting at the vulnerable feelings, Andrew Tate would go like, yeah, and that's when you know you're in the flow. But now Andrew Tate is going, then that usually indicates to us therapists that, I've threatened something. We were in the flow, and now he's doing this. It's also possible that Andrew Tate just has to think about it, but let's see what he says.
I want to know about your pain.
Yeah, it's strange because I'm being as honest as possible. It's strange because I had this instilled sense of duty where even though I'm in a jail cell and I can't leave, and even though I'm cripplingly bored, I don't feel like I had time to feel pain, or I didn't feel like I had time to be a victim.
You had nothing but time.
No, I didn't have time.
What are you talking about?
Because everyone outside still relied on me. So I when I would get on the phone, people would...
Is that avoidance, though?
I don't know.
Do you keep busy?
If David were my trainee, or he hired me to consult about this session, I would ask David what was going on with him in this moment, because he's kind of peppering Andrew. Who cares, just a YouTube video, but if this was an actual therapy session, I would worry that David is actually losing Andrew at this point, because the pain question was met with Andrew saying, I didn't have time to feel pain. And David's contention is, you must have been feeling pain, because it's just, I'm guessing David is thinking it would be impossible for you not to feel some version of pain. It might help if David were to specify what he means by pain, like self-disappointment or hurt from the attacks or something like that. But the way that Andrew is responding, it's a different mode than we saw earlier. It's also possible that the way that Andrew sees the word pain, he actually didn't feel pain. So it's also possible that Andrew's trying to appease by answering it kind of, instead of just saying, no, I didn't feel pain. Although, it's possible that David has it all figured out and he knows like he needs this to happen in the conversation for it to go in the direction that he hopes it will go.
You avoid your feelings by keeping busy, being on the computer all the time?
All the things I had to do still had to be done. Just because they threw me in a cell, it just made it more difficult, which means I have less time than ever because the difficulty's been increased. And when I would get on the phone, we wouldn't discuss how I'm feeling. I'd be worried about how everyone else is. They'd be like, how are you? Yeah, I'm in jail. What's going on with this? Are you okay?
So it's very consistent with the persona that he presents, that self-denial of his humanness. And what that'll do to someone is the needs and emotions will pile up and pile up and pile up and express themselves in very problematic ways. If the allegations about Andrew Tate are even halfway true, I have very little sympathy for him as an individual. But I will say I've treated a lot of people who present like this, who did not commit crimes that he allegedly committed, that I had tremendous compassion for, because even though they present this way as very pompous and they brag a lot and they have it all figured out, that at their core, the thing that I tell people is that underneath the defensive structure of someone with narcissism is a borderline person. If you're familiar, people with borderline personality disorder on the surface can be very vulnerable, and their emotions are they wear their heart on their sleeve. They announce their emotions. They have a lot of pain and fear and hurt, and they will let you know about it if you're close enough to them. And for people with a narcissistic defensive structure, underneath is all of that, but they just have a way of masking it to themselves and others. And almost you could see it as people with narcissism are worse off than people with borderline, because at least people with borderline express it sometimes, which will provoke at least sometimes attunement from other people, or care or compassion, and maybe from themselves. At the very least, they'll look at themselves and their needs, and they'll be like, my needs aren't being met, or I have these emotions. For people with narcissism, that never happens. Unless they have a complete meltdown, which does happen sometimes. I'm not diagnosing them, of course. I'm just talking about my clinical experience. It's possible this persona has nothing to do with his real personality. But I use this as a jumping off point for people to think about their own lives for themselves. Some of you might also be on the narcissistic spectrum and might benefit from realizing that you too also have a lot of pain and hurt on the inside. That, in fact, that is the primary corrective experience and awareness for people who are on the narcissistic spectrum. For these individuals, the primary therapeutic drive that I have is vulnerability, 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 and attunement when they are vulnerable, meaning they are vulnerable with someone who is attuned and cares. And to the point where with my clients who are on the narcissistic spectrum, at some point in every session, I or they will mention this. I know that I'm sort of in a later phase of therapy with someone like this when they come into therapy and they say something like, oh, Kirk, you'd be so proud of me. So yesterday, I noticed some bad things were happening for me. So I sat down and thought about my vulnerable side, and I even indicated it over a text to my wife that she hurt my feelings. And I did that. I said that I was sad, I was hurt. You'd be so proud of me, because for years I've been telling them, trying to convince them that the road to wellness for them is through their own vulnerability. By being vulnerable with people that they can trust, it'll solve their emotional problems and their relational problems. Because when you are vulnerable, it lets other people in, and it explains a lot of things. If, for a typical story would be someone on a narcissistic spectrum, they get triggered and they start to criticize and lecture their spouse. Let's say it's a husband, so he will start to criticize his wife and lecture her and say, you're so emotional and you're illogical, and it's always about you, just kind of those kinds of attacks. And then the next day, he, through therapy, has learned, okay, they start to have these bullet points that they, because it doesn't naturally occur to them. It barely naturally occurs to anybody, but particularly them. So they wake up the next morning and say, okay, I got in a fight last night, and I know through years of therapy that the road to wellness is vulnerability. And so what was happening, I'm in my head, this obsession about how my wife is wrong. That's all that I can think of. That's all that's in my brain. But if I want to save my marriage and myself, I have to assume that I am not being vulnerable, I'm not expressing it, and that there's some sort of hurt and some sort of fear that's going on. What is that? And then he might say, oh, well, she triggered me earlier in the night because she was late from work or something, or she undermined me with parenting, or I wanted to go on this vacation with her and she said that she didn't really have interest in going to that location or something. And then that triggered me because I was hurt, but I didn't know I was hurt, so I went on the attack and da-da-da. Okay. Next morning, they're like, okay, that's what happened for me. And then they will tell their wife, and as there's baby steps, right? They're not completely vulnerable, but they test waters. So he texts his wife, I'm sorry about last night, and my feelings were hurt when you said you didn't want to go to that location for vacation or something. And from the wife's side of things, it's very easy to narrativize the whole thing of, great, just because I didn't want to go to Cancun with my husband, I got 3 hours of anger and lecture and criticism because he's a psychopath and a sociopath who has no empathy and no compassion. And the reason why I don't want to go to Cancun is because I was traumatized there before, some real reason as to why she said what she said. And so, for the wife, there's this narrative of just like, I don't matter. He is so self-centered and just mean for no reason. That's the narrative, because that's the way it looks, right? But to hear from him, to say, I was triggered and I was hurt. And of course, what she deserves is to not be treated that way. But if she were to be treated that way, for him to sit down and say, I'm so sorry, I have these issues. I was harmed when I was a kid, and I was completely wrong. I should never have criticized you. Every time that I've done that, it's a defense. It's all my fault. That's what she deserves. But, say she gets a little bit of that, and it will solve a lot of things, because she's like, oh, okay, that's different. I was narrativizing it as he's a sociopath, but now what he's telling me is that he has vulnerability that I can kind of relate to. He solves it by being critical and lecturing me, which is terrible. Now, she might still decide to leave, by the way. I'm not saying you're supposed to stay in a situation like that, but it solves his need to express his emotion and have it be heard and rewarded, at least by me as a therapist, and will resolve the conflict much faster. So, the road to wellness is vulnerability. And it's really true for all of us, but particularly for people on the narcissistic spectrum and the avoidant attachment spectrum. All right, well, let's adjourn there. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.